Welcome to this explainer on the Global Issues Daily. Today, we're deconstructing an operation so meticulously planned it honestly feels like something straight out of a Hollywood script, but it was entirely real. We're talking about a masterclass in criminal engineering that unfolded in the dead of night against a speeding government train. Throughout this explainer, we're going to strip away the pop culture myths and look at exactly how a crew of men pulled off the crime of the century, and, the fatal human errors that brought the whole thing crashing down. 67 million pounds. When you adjust for modern inflation, that staggering figure, which is equivalent to nearly 800 crore rupees today, was stolen in absolute pitch-black darkness. And get this, without a single shot being fired. The sheer scale of this loot transformed what could have been a standard heist into a massive international incident. But as you'll see, taking a fortune of this magnitude required a lot more than just brute force. It required absolutely unprecedented intelligence. Part 1, the perfect crime conceived. So, to understand how a colossal sum like this was actually taken, we have to look at the architects behind the blueprint. Mastermind Bruce Reynolds realized pretty quickly that his London crew, despite being seasoned criminals, well, they completely lacked the highly specific mechanical skills you need for a train job. So, they did something unprecedented. They formed an alliance with a rival gang known as the South Coast Raiders, guys who actually had experience robbing trains. Together, they essentially built a highly specialized 15-man syndicate, perfectly blending tactical planning with on-the-ground operational expertise. But here is where things get really fascinating. They had a stroke of sheer luck. Or actually, scratch that. It was highly classified intelligence provided by an unknown Royal Mail senior security officer. This absolute ghost of an insider handed Reynolds a goldmine. First, they knew exactly which carriage to hit. Second, because of the previous week's bank holiday, that carriage would hold roughly 3 million pounds instead of the usual 300,000. And crucially, they were pointed to reserve carriage M3024M, simply because the carriages fitted with new security alarms happened to be out of service that day. I mean, what are the odds? So this specific HVP, or high value packages carriage, became the singular focus of a plot that took months to design. Now, typically these Royal Mail trains operated completely on the fly. Local post office staff would literally hang mailbags on elevated racks, and staff inside the moving train would snatch them using a net. The train never even stopped. But the HVP was different. It was essentially a rolling bank vault. It held massive amounts of cash transferring between cities, making it the ultimate prize. Part 2, the Sears Crossing hijack. With the blueprint locked in, the syndicate moved into the shadows of the British countryside. The execution was literally timed to the minute. On the night of August 7th into the early hours of the 8th, a 12-carriage train left Glasgow Central at 6:50 p.m., just hurtling toward London. Waiting in the bushes near the tracks at Sears Crossing, the robbers lay in wait. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., they executed a perfectly timed ambush that brought this speeding behemoth to a complete sudden halt. And this is where their ingenuity absolutely shines. How do you stop a train cleanly? Well, you don't derail it. Instead, they manipulated the railway's own infrastructure. By simply covering the green signal with a glove, powering a fake red light with a portable battery, and severing the line-side emergency telephone cables, they completely tricked the 58-year-old driver, Jack Mills, into stopping. Just like that, they entirely isolated the train from the rest of the world. But that mechanical precision suddenly gave way to grim violence. When the second man stepped out to use that severed emergency phone, he was immediately ambushed. The robbers stormed the engine from both sides. Driver Jack Mills tried to resist, and he was brutally struck over the head with an iron rod, falling unconscious at the controls. Moving with swift efficiency, the robbers detached the engine and the HVP carriage, leaving the remaining 10 carriages and the 72 male staff working inside them completely stranded and unaware in the dark. Part 3. The bride go, breed haste. So, the plan now was to drive the uncoupled section away to a secure unloading point. The gang had actually brought along their own retired train driver for this exact moment. But there was a major problem. Upon entering the cab, he panicked. He was entirely unfamiliar with this modern engine's controls. Forced to improvise, the robbers had to rouse a bleeding, concussed Jack Mills and force him to drive the train 1 kilometer down the track to Brighton Go Bridge. Waiting right below was an Austin Lodestar truck. The clock was ticking. They now had exactly 15 minutes to move an astonishing 2.5 tons of cash. Inside the HVP were 128 sacks stuffed with 1 pound, 5 pound, and 10 shilling notes. To put that into perspective, it is a massive physical burden. Forming a highly efficient human chain down a steep embankment, the gang moved with military precision. Within their strict 50-minute window, they managed to load 120 of those heavy sacks into their truck, abandoning just 8 because they literally ran out of time. With fake-plated Land Rovers running interference, they vanished into the night, getting back to their hideout by 4:30 a.m. Part 4. A fatal miscalculation. Now, despite the mechanical brilliance we just talked about, human hubris and a few shockingly simple mistakes were about to unravel their perfect crime. Right before fleeing the HVB carriage, one of the robbers issued this arrogant warning to the bound and bruised Royal Mail staff. He told them, "Don't try to move for 30 minutes. It was meant to buy the gang time to escape. But actually, it was their very first fatal flaw. You see, by doing the math, police immediately realized that a 30-minute head start meant the gang's hideout had to be within a roughly 50-kilometer driving radius of Bright & Go Bridge. They instantly established a targeted search grid. Meanwhile, back at Leatherslade Farm, which was just 43 kilometers away, the gang was celebrating. They were dividing a haul that netted them about 150,000 pounds each. But as they tuned in to police VHF radio frequencies, that jubilation turned to absolute terror. They were trapped inside the grid. Panic set in. A quiet departure they had planned for Sunday was frantically moved up to Friday. They hired a cleaner to wipe down the farm and burn it to the ground, completely destroying all evidence. But get this, the guy absconded with his cut of the money without ever lighting the match. So when police inevitably raided the farm, they walked right into a treasure trove of evidence. Empty mail sacks, a hastily painted yellow truck, and, most notoriously, a Monopoly board the gang had been playing using real stolen cash. And it was completely covered in their fingerprints. Since these were known criminals, authorities matched the prints in no time, rapidly closing the net on the century's biggest case. Part 5. Legacy of the Robbery. While pop culture loves to glorify this heist, it is absolutely vital we strip away that romantic myth. The true legacy of that night was a devastated family and a working-class man whose life was forever ruined. Train driver Jack Mills suffered severe head trauma that he never fully recovered from. He couldn't ever return to his job, and he tragically passed away just 7 years later from complications related to the sheer shock and injury of that night. Because of the sheer audacity of the crime and the violence involved, the British justice system responded with unprecedented severity. 14 of the 16 men involved were captured, and the courts handed down staggering 30-year prison sentences to almost all of them. They absolutely made an example out of this. And as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a chilling, unresolved mystery that has basically outlived the Great Train Robbery itself. Out of that entire crew, only 2 men completely evaded justice: the panicked replacement train driver and that shadowy Royal Mail's senior security officer whose inside intelligence made the whole thing possible. To this day, neither man's identity has ever been discovered. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on the Global Issues Daily. If you found this breakdown fascinating, make sure you hit subscribe and let us know down in the comments. Do you think we will ever discover the true identity of that ultimate insider?